I think one of the biggest misunderstandings people have about forgiveness is believing that forgiveness is something we do for other people, as if forgiveness is a gift we offer to someone who wronged us. But I don't think that's what forgiveness is. I think forgiveness is something we do for ourselves. People often think forgiveness means approving of what happened, pretending it didn't hurt, allowing someone back into their life, or surrendering their right to be upset. But forgiveness is none of those things. Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is not forgetting. And forgiveness is not permission. Forgiveness is self-respect. Because who are you really punishing by holding on to anger? Who are you really hurting by carrying resentment for years? Most of the time, not the person who hurt you. You're hurting yourself. And perhaps that's why I think forgiveness is less emotional than people realize. It's logical. At some point, you have to ask yourself, how long do I intend to carry this? A month? A year? A decade? The rest of my life? Because eventually the wound may have been created by another person, but the continued suffering becomes self-inflicted. One of the greatest acts of forgiveness in my own life involved my parents. Growing up, I carried a tremendous amount of resentment. I looked around and saw other children, particularly Caucasian children, living what appeared to be easier lives. Less pressure, fewer expectations, more freedom, and I was jealous. I didn't understand why my parents were so demanding, why grades mattered so much, why success was emphasized so heavily. And for years, I interpreted that pressure as something negative, something unfair, something that separated me from everyone else. But as I got older, my perspective changed. Not because my parents were perfect. No parent is. But because I finally understood the intentions behind their actions. I realized that much of what I interpreted as pressure was rooted in love. Imperfect love. Human love. But love, nonetheless. And perhaps that's when forgiveness truly began. Not when I decided they had done nothing wrong, but when I stopped demanding perfection from imperfect people. Because forgiveness often begins when we stop asking, were they perfect? And start asking, were they human? I also think people misunderstand who forgiveness is actually for. Because when someone hurts us, we often feel angry at ourselves for trusting them, for missing the signs, for allowing it to happen, for being vulnerable. And sometimes the resentment we think is directed at another person is actually directed inward. That's why I believe forgiving others is often an act of self-forgiveness. It's letting go of being angry at yourself for being human, for trusting, for loving, for hoping. Because none of those things are weaknesses. They're part of what makes life meaningful. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson forgiveness teaches us. Forgiveness is not relinquishing the right to be upset. Forgiveness is accepting that hurt is an inevitability and a natural part of life. If you love, you'll eventually be hurt. If you trust, you'll eventually be disappointed. If you care, you'll eventually experience loss. Not because life is cruel, but because life is real. And maybe peace doesn't come from avoiding pain. Maybe peace comes from accepting that pain is part of the journey. Because resentment keeps us chained to the past, but forgiveness allows us to move forward. Not because what happened no longer matters, but because it no longer controls us. And perhaps that's what freedom truly is. Not forgetting, not excusing, not surrendering, simply deciding that your future deserves more attention than your past. Until next time, take care.